recording. Good. Okay, so this is the January 21st, 2021 meeting of the Easthampton Ranked Choice Voting Ad Hoc Committee. And pursuant to Governor Baker's March 12th, 2020 order suspending certain provisions of the Open Meeting Law, General Laws, Chapter 30A, Section 18, and the Governor's March 15th, 2020 order imposing strict limitations on the number of people that may gather in one place. This meeting of the Easthampton Ranked Choice Voting Ad Hoc Committee is being conducted via remote participation. No in-person attendance of members of the public will be permitted, but every effort will be made to ensure that the public can adequately access the proceedings as provided for in the order. A reminder that persons who would like to view this meeting while in progress may do so by connecting via Zoom as described on the meeting agenda. All right. Public speak. We have no members of the public here, so we will skip past that. Approval of minutes. So we have 2 minutes to approve from Tom. One of them is the minutes from the July 16th meeting, and I will make a motion to approve those.
Second.
And any issues? Do people feel good about voting on these? Okay. All in favor of approving the minutes?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed or abstaining?
I don't remember if I was at those meetings.
I think you were both.
Okay, and aye.
All right, motion passes. I make a motion to approve the minutes for the November 19th meeting.
Second.
Seconded. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed or abstaining? Motion passes. Tom, thank you for doing the minutes. They look good.
Sorry they're late.
Yeah, it's, you know, that's life. We have them. I think we're, as far as I can tell from my little folder, we're still missing minutes from one meeting, and those minutes are the October 15th meeting. So if anyone knows what's up with those, let me know. It's kind of weird. Okay, we still don't have a permanent secretary, but I know Owen had volunteered an email to do the minutes for tonight. Is that cool?
Yeah, absolutely. I think I'm way behind on doing this for the committee, so I'm more than happy to.
Okay, awesome. So Owen's going to be taking the minutes for tonight's meeting. New member discussion. I don't think there's much to discuss. Barbara, do you want to just to that?
Yeah.
I know we talked about it a little before the meeting started. But.
Sure. So the mayor put forward a candidate for the Board of Registrars, Jackie Brousseau Pereira, however you say her name.
Jackie Brousseau Pereira.
Right. Okay, there you go. So she will be brought up for approval by the council February 3rd, and I'm sure she'll be approved, and I think she'll be a great member to the Board of Registrars. And I think that she would be interested in joining this committee. She first wanted to check and make sure it wasn't going to conflict with the Affordable Housing Committee, but it doesn't look like it does. So I think that she'll be willing to join us. I did invite her tonight, but she couldn't make it. So
that's great. Yeah, that's awesome. Thanks. Thank you for. Oh, go ahead.
Sorry to break in. I looked, and I think that October 15th was a meeting that we canceled. So
was it?
I think, yeah.
Because I have an agenda.
Oh, right, because it was close to the election and everything was.
I do remember there was one.
Okay. Great. Thank you for that. So we won't have minutes for that one. So that's good.
Problem solved.
Who took them last time? The last meeting?
The last meeting, they were done by...
I think it might have been me.
Yeah.
Okay.
They're in sort of a table format.
Yeah, I did submit them. I guess we have to vote on them, huh?
Oh, good call. Maybe we haven't accepted those. Yeah, we do. They're very nice minutes. Very. orders and bullets and everything. Not to discount yours, Tom. They're also very nice.
It's easy when you just copy someone else's format, you know.
Okay, so motion to accept the minutes for the December 17th meeting.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed or abstaining?
I abstain. I was not at that meeting.
Okay. Motion passes with one abstention. All right, let's go on to talking about the ordinance. Couple things here. I will screen share this. Owen had some notes about putting these in alphabetical order, the definitions. I'm inclined to agree with that. This is a legal document, and I'm not really prepared to make a strong case that they shouldn't be in alphabetical order. So I rearranged them here into alphabetical order. Again, I know we had some prior discussion about this, and we had a little sentence there at the front, but I'm not super concerned about this, and I guess I on the whole like the idea of it being consistent with the rest of the ordinance document. Does anyone have? Owen, go ahead.
Yeah, and that was the question. So I mean, I'm not overly invested in it either, but I think the question had come up kind of what our process is, or what's the convention that we use, and all the other ordinances in the city are in alphabetical order, and MGL and CMR. So I just think in terms of it looking pretty, I totally agree with the rest of the committee that, sorry, for some reason my Zoom's on another screen. It's driving me crazy. I agree with the rest of the committee that it made sense to put them in order of appearance, but think of it like a glossary or an index, a book or a dictionary, that it's in alphabetical order. And I just thought that it would make sense for it to be just like we have it with the rest of our ordinances. So that was the only reason that I brought that up.
Mm-hmm. I think it's a good point. And it makes it simpler. It doesn't have a little disclaimer at the front.
The charter also has them alphabetically, because I was just working on that.
Okay. I'm inclined to leave it this way, alphabetically, if there's no.
There's really not that many, so it's not like they're far apart from each other.
Right.
Yeah, I don't feel strongly about this, but if that's in keeping with the rest of it, then that's fine with me.
Okay. So I'd like to move on to the write-in stuff, and Tom had given us some language here. Unfortunately, I don't think this language is going to work, and here's why. So Tom had written, when votes are initially tabulated, all write-in votes will be tabulated together as if they were cast for a single candidate. Only in the case that write-in votes receive a majority of votes will the clerk be required to reconcile ballots to individual write-in candidates prior to declaring the winner of an election. The reason that I don't quite think this is going to work is a scenario right here, which is 2 candidates on the ballot. Candidate A gets 1,000 votes. Candidate B gets 995 votes. And there's 10 write-ins for candidate B. Okay, so under those wordings, then candidate A would actually win the election, but we need to take into account those 10 write-ins for candidate B.
So what if somebody like if you were to if you were to mark candidate B voting right now, and also write in their name and fill in both ovals, I mean,
that would be an overvote.
Well,
I'm more concerned about somebody just marking a circle for the write-in and then writing in the name of a candidate that's already listed on the ballot.
Is that a thing people do, Barb?
Not very often, no.
No, but I've seen 1 or 2 of those.
Yeah.
If it's not very often, that's good. Then we won't have to rely on anyone ever counting those tabulated votes, or tabulating those votes. But I think that we could probably change the language and just say if the total of the write-ins is enough to, if the total of the write-ins is greater than the difference between first and second place, or something along those lines.
Okay, wait, hold on. Let me just make sure I'm not being super dense here. Like, say that we're treating all the write-ins as a single candidate, right? So in our first go through, in your scenario, candidate A gets 1,000, candidate B gets 995, and proxy candidate C, assuming that all the write-ins are a single candidate, gets 10. No one has a majority there, right?
Mm-hmm.
So since nobody has a majority, at that point, we do have to look at who these write-ins are for.
Right. So, well, the write-ins, we wouldn't though, because under the language that you put in, those write-ins would be exhausted. All those ballots would be exhausted, unless they had second choices on there. But let's assume for a second that they don't, they would just get exhausted without being reconciled.
Mm-hmm.
So I thought maybe we could do this by adding a little sentence here that says, when votes are initially tabulated, all write-in votes that are not for a candidate that is listed on the ballot or is already listed on the ballot will be tabulated together as if they were cast for a single candidate. So that means, like, you know, so on election night, for those of you who haven't done that, we take all the write-ins flagged by the machine, all those ballots, and we tally them for who they are, basically reconciling them. Now imagine on election night what we would do is we would segregate all of the ballots with write-ins, and right there at the polls we would tabulate the first choice write-ins from that pile. So if there were ballots that had a write-in but it was for a third choice or a fifth choice or whatever, I don't think we would tabulate that at the polls. We would put it aside because it might need to be reconciled later, but it might not need to be reconciled ever. But so for first choice candidates, and we would reconcile those by basically going through them and saying, you know, there are this many for this candidate who's already on the ballot. There's this many for this candidate who's already on the ballot, and then there's this many for other. It seems like that would be really easy, really fast to do for the write-ins. And then we can kind of keep that other category as a way of saving a lot of time. But then again, currently we basically reconcile all the first choice write-ins already as part of our end of the night. So we could I'm not necessarily opposed to just continuing to do that, to just reconciling all the first choice write-ins. You know, we could potentially even use the same forms that we already have to do that. We do it the same way we do it now. And then, you know, a lot of those are just going to be eliminated right away.
Yeah.
We could even, in order to save software entry time, we could sort of tailor this to say, like, you know, after the first, this is not the wording, but I'm just going to kind of throw it out there because it's off the top of my head. But after all the write-ins have been reconciled at the polls, you know, if the total number of votes for write-in candidates that
I do think that, you know, the state requires you to count all the ballots at the polls.
Right.
So I think, you know, I don't know if we're going to have, you know, different levels for write-ins, you know.
The ranking can occur at a separate location, right? So it
You mean
seems
the
like
tabulation ranking?
Yeah, tabulation, excuse
Tabulation,
me.
yes, it can, yep.
Yeah, so it seems like the scenario you were just talking about would seem reasonable.
Yeah, so basically, like, again, sort of saying, like, if all the write-ins that aren't for a candidate that already appears, like, they don't all have to be entered into the software.
Right. All right.
Those ballots, that write-in group can be eliminated as a group before being reconciled.
Right.
And that doesn't include like future deeper down ranking write-ins, and it doesn't include write-ins for candidates that appear on the ballot, which is just the one gotcha that I feel about this is. But I don't think we can treat them all as one candidate that goes through all of the rounds until the end.
I think your wording makes sense. It's clear. You know, you look through them. If you see somebody's written in a candidate's name that's on the ballot, then it just gets included with the, you know, with his count, and the rest is all just a batch and it's put aside.
Okay.
I mean,
so then the first sentence of this I think works. When votes are initially tabulated, all write-in votes that are not for a candidate that is already listed on the ballot will be tabulated together, as if they were cast for a single candidate. Maybe we don't even, honestly, maybe we don't do that and we just keep doing things the way they are. You know, when votes are initially tabulated, all first choice write-in votes are recorded at the polls. And then we say something like, if the total of write-in votes for candidates that are not already listed on the ballot you know, would be eliminated, then they don't need to be reconciled in the software. Again, the wording there is junk, but like, do you know what I mean? Does that?
So,
maybe. I think, or sorry, Barb, go ahead.
So say there was somebody, say like we had the instance where there were people running for, you know, state rep in Northampton, and we had a big bunch of people wrote in their names.
Right. Yep.
I mean, it was more than just your scattered write-ins. I mean, so it like, but there wasn't enough to win, but there was enough to make it be somebody who we did, you know, keep track of. What happens to those?
So
just throw them out.
Yeah, we can't just throw them out. So I'm actually now starting to feel like this is a solution in search of a problem that might not even exist, because as far as I can tell, the software handles write-ins, and part of the process is simply entering them. And now currently, Barbara, I'm sure what you do is you take all those sheets.
Yep.
And you enter them into Excel.
I just put all others for the people who got one or two or three. We put all others, and you know, if there's people who got more than just all others, I mean, they're all on the sheet so you can see them. You know, then you might put them in, but you know.
So to Dan's point, what is the problem that we're looking for a solution for? Is it the speed of tabulation on election night?
Yeah, it seems like we're trying to bend over backwards to prevent reconciliation of write-ins, but I honestly don't think reconciling all the write-ins for an election is going to be that bad.
Not to mention that we shouldn't be rushing things anyway if the election's close enough for it to matter.
Yeah.
In other words, that what you're saying is true, it won't be that bad, and if it is that bad, then we shouldn't rush it.
Yeah.
I'm mostly worried about wasting a lot of time on a process that's unnecessary, but...
Right. Yeah, I mean, I think we could just do the write-ins exactly how we do now. I suppose we're going to have to figure out how to look at them. Like, okay, these people had these for first choice, and we'll just do it the same as we do right now. And then the scattered ones just are all lumped together, and they're just disregarded. And like, I mean, if you want to keep track of like the Alex Morse votes for, you know, rep in Congress, or the Sheba votes because they were more than just 5 or 6, I suppose you could put them in. It wouldn't hurt anything.
Right.
You just, you know, if you have anybody that ends up with, you know, you can tell that maybe a group of people wanted this name to show up. I mean, I think you could just enter it in the software and it would just take care of it on its own, wouldn't it?
Yeah. More or less, yes.
I think entering every name should count should be done, because there's a lot of
Well,
information.
we
to
write
go from
we
that.
write them in, but we don't. I mean, we write them on a sheet, but I never put all of them in the, in the tally, because it's ridiculous.
And I don't think we're going to need to do that, because I think in 99% of the cases, they're not going to get past the first round. So here's what I kind of think, and I don't think this necessarily needs to be in the ordinance either. I think this just needs to be in election procedures,
Right.
which is currently it's sort of something we already do, but we might want to formalize it a little bit more anyway. So instead of taking all of the write-in ones and just kind of putting them on the top of the box in that precinct, maybe we just have a separate envelope that's like, these are all the write-in. These are all the ballots that had write-ins. Just so that they're there and easily accessible.
Right.
You don't
right.
have to kind of just go on like a word of like, oh yeah, kind of try and tuck them on the top. It's just like, no, they're in an envelope. These are all the ones with write-ins.
Right. That's what we were doing the last time.
Yeah. And
Because if we ever had to
they're all
go
right there.
them, they were right there.
Yeah. And then I'm not sure that this is going to be so onerous.
I think, to me, it kind of depends on what the software looks like, how who you have to enter in. But
Right.
you can tell if there's a write-in that people care about, you know.
And if it comes, we can always come back to the, if it turns out to be, oh my God, this might add 2 hours to election night.
Yeah.
In elections where it doesn't matter at all, we can come back and we can address that specifically with the city council and add something as an add-on ordinance. But I'm not convinced that that's really going to be the case.
So
Tom, did you sort of have a hand up? Did you? Or
yeah, a couple times.
Okay. Go ahead.
Yeah, so there's a couple things. I guess, so let me address that last point first. Just for the sake of making sure that there's like, okay, so when we had to do that special election in the fall for the, to fill Bill Lynch's seat, one thing that I did not love, just from sort of a political standpoint, but was necessary, was us having to change the rules, like at such point as like, arguably we had some information. Now it didn't matter, and that wasn't why.
Which one are you talking about?
Our council election,
Oh,
where we elected council. But we used ranked choice voting for that. And some of the folks who maybe are a little bit skeptical of the system were very quick to jump on that and jump online to say, oh, they just changed the rules at the last minute, with the sort of implicit thing being that we were somehow changing the rules to favor one candidate or disfavor another, which is obviously ridiculous. But like, I do think that I have a real preference of getting this right the first time, rather than coming back and being like, we actually looked at it and the thing that we thought we were going to do isn't going to work, so can we change it? I think that for the first time through, that doesn't necessarily project a lot of confidence in the system, just from a political standpoint. And so I do think, like, if there's any thought that doing this one way or the other could potentially delay the results of the election for hours when there's no chance of it actually affecting the results, that's something that we need to know and be ready for early. That's my opinion.
well, let me just kind of tell you how we specifically deal with write-ins now.
Okay.
See, like, really what difference there would be, except for the part of putting it into a software program to let it do its thing. So the write-ins are separated from all the rest of the ballot. So we take all of those write-ins and we take them over to a table, and we have a sheet where one person will go through the pile of write-ins and the other person will write it down. So every single race, every single person, they go to the particular race and they write down that person's name. And then, you keep track per precinct how many votes each person gets. Now, 99% of the time, write-ins are just people writing in themselves or their friend or Donald Duck, which obviously those are blanks, those stupid ones, or they'll write in, somebody that's Donald Trump or what, they'll put somebody that's running for another race and they'll write it in on another, so pretty much almost always it's people just, writing in stupid stuff. But obviously there are situations where they're serious candidates, and usually you know about those ahead of time. It's very rare that you're going to be a surprise write-in person. You're either going to hear about it ahead of time, because if otherwise, there's not going to be any way they're going to get very many votes. So we would still do the same thing. And we would be able to look at it and say like, oh, we've got 10 scattered votes for everybody voting themselves in their next door neighbor. And maybe one person got 2 or 3 votes, but everybody else just got 1. So you can pretty much, you put all those in all others. If there was somebody like Alex Morse, who people really wanted, they wrote his name in. And so he maybe got 25 per precinct or something. And I suppose you could go to the software and you could input Alex Morse and what he got and count them. But I mean, what else different would you really do?
Well, I guess my question is, if there were cases where somebody voted for a write-in and then put a second or third, I mean, yeah, maybe that isn't a thing. Like, I guess, when we put those votes in to count for a particular candidate, like, I guess it really only matters in cases where there's a write-in candidate that could actually maybe win, right?
Yeah. I mean, even on the state level, if the state, before a state election, they'll let cities and towns know if they have heard of a serious write-in person, and then they're watching for them. And usually, they'll say, unless we're watching for people, you have to tally the votes. You got to write them down, so you're always going to know who they're for. But it's not a serious, and really and truly, you're going to know about a write-in candidate for the most part. It's not going to, all of a sudden on election day, people aren't going to just come together and have enough.
Yeah, I believe you there. Absolutely. I guess I'm just wondering, process-wise, like, doesn't this get a little bit extra complicated by the fact that somebody might write somebody in and then rank other candidates after that?
Or vice versa. It's actually vice versa that makes it more complicated, is when somebody ranks a listed candidate first and then subsequently has write-ins. And I think, in my mind, that's where the scanning and adjudicating of those ballots would be interesting, I'll just put aside that for a second because there's more information about that, but it's not really an option. That's where it gets a little tricky for me, but I do feel like we're putting the cart before the horse a little bit, because this is software that is designed to handle all of these situations, including the weird ones, like it's not even that weird that somebody ranks a write-in below a listed candidate. And so I think I'm not worried that we're going to have a showstopper with the software. I just don't think we should try and predict how the software is going to make this onerous or not before it's had a chance to prove that it's onerous. I'm not particularly worried about, I don't think it's going to be a matter of hours. I think it's going to be a matter of a little bit of extra time on election night if we have a bunch of these that we have to deal with process-wise. But I can't imagine that the software doesn't have a decent kind of workflow for this.
Yeah.
Like it has to.
To me, I almost feel like I have to see what the software looks like before we really, if there's a space where you type in a name and you say this person wrote in like 10 first ranking write-ins, so we'll write the name and then, they'll be counted.
It's like I imagine here.
I'm not going to put in everybody that got 1 vote. That's for sure.
Right. In the absolute worst case scenario, I can see each of the ballots that has a write-in needing to be transcribed. And that would take a little while, but it's not going to like take days.
What do you
know?
mean by transcribed?
Essentially the process that we do at the polls.
Oh, well, we have to do that anyway.
We have to do that anyway, but essentially that, but for all of the rankings on those ballots. And,
Yeah, I
and
guess I
that
need to
would go
understand.
directly into the software.
I guess for me, I need to understand before I really know how I feel about this. I need to understand more about how this workflow like actually goes, and that might be something that we're not able to fully understand until we get the software.
It's not, yeah.
Which should be.
Well, I can tell. It will be quite soon. So I can tell you this, which I'm going to go over this a little bit more in a minute. So Jeff has confirmed, based on the machines that we have, there is an option to save digital images. However, we are not allowed by the state to turn it on. If you wanted to utilize this function for local RCV elections, Barbara would have to get approval from the state to do so. So this is where I was talking about the software having a workflow, because I've read the software guide.
How would that work though? How would they, I mean, do you know how that would even work? Because we're not going to print out every single ballot that goes.
No. It would be stored digitally, and the software has a workflow to reconcile and adjudicate write-ins right there in the software. So you go, you pull up like, okay, here's my stack of write-ins, number one, and it will highlight where the little write-in is discovered, and you'll see the handwriting right next to it, and you get to say, oh, this is a vote for X. And you do that, and then you do next. And it goes through and you process all of those just one by one based on the scans. Again, because of state law, we don't have access to those scans. So it's probably a process that has to be done manually and not through the software. Again, we may not need to do that if there aren't enough write-ins for the software to care. So if you think about the data, the cast vote records that's stored on the cards, the machine doesn't know who the write-in is for because it doesn't do handwriting recognition, right? But it does know that there's a write-in there. So
the oval is filled in.
the oval's filled in.
And sometimes there's no name at all. They just fill in the oval.
Yeah, sometimes it's blank. But the machine is not determining that. So the data we can get and know that we will certainly be getting from the machine is that this particular ballot voted candidate A, number 1, write-in number 2, candidate B, number 3. We don't know who that write-in is for, but we know it's a write-in, right?
Right.
And that's with no work. We don't have to do any work. The machine already knows that, and the software already knows that. The only work that we might have to do is tell the software who that write-in is for. And I think that if it's not a first choice write-in, we do not need to do that at the polls, but we may actually need to do that back when doing the RCV tabulation. And in the worst case, we would have to do that for all of the ballots that have not first choice write-ins. And we might have to do it for all the first choice ones too, because again, our tabulation at the polls is paper-based, and we might need to be able to feed that in on a ballot by ballot basis to the software if it needs that. Now, my guess is that the software is smart enough to know that if there aren't enough, it's going to kind of just skip over the need to reconcile those. But we don't know that for sure at this point. And but it is something that we're going to know in a few weeks because we're going to be able to experiment with it. Mm-hmm. So for the time being, my inclination is to actually not try and preempt this, and instead to just say all first choice write-in votes are tabulated at the polls. Because right now the process, and I assume state law, says write-ins need to be counted at the polls. But I think what we need to specify is that we're only doing that process for first choices at the polls, which is essentially exactly what we do right now. In order to satisfy state law, we need to continue doing that. But my gut says and again, I'm not a lawyer, but my gut says we do not need to worry about subsequent ranked write-ins to satisfy state law there at the polls. I think we just need to do those first choice ballots, and then the rest is centralized RCV tabulation. If committee members feel worried or strongly about that, we could check with, with a lawyer about it, but
Yeah, I mean, you do always have the paper. You have the first choice ones. You'll have what the workers write down at the polls, and
Right.
you have the next ballots. It's not like you don't have them.
right. You can always go back to them. I'm just worried here about satisfying state law. If this wasn't in state law that we had to deal with write-ins at the polls, I would suggest that we don't. We take all the write-ins, put them in an envelope, we take them back to the central, whatever. But we can't do that.
Nope.
So I think what we need in the ordinance is just something that says we count all the first choice votes as write-ins. Well, all the write-in first choice votes at the polls, and that's it.
But if you're, okay.
And that's literally just to satisfy state law, right?
Yeah, and I think, I think well, I don't know what Jeff said he had to run by Michelle. Michelle is at the state level. Did you see when I sent that email?
Yes.
I kind of wondered what that was about.
I have submitted the necessary documents to Michelle and asked her for a schedule to approve the software for RCV. I guess there's a certification process for, I don't know the details, but.
I mean, there is for the machine, so I suppose if there's software that's to be used, they have to certify it.
I guess so. We can follow up with him about that. I saw that, but I don't.
I mean, I'm really curious to see how it's all going to look, and maybe once we see how it's set up, it'll be really clear. Like, oh, okay, there's where you put your write-ins.
Yep.
And it's just pretty much transcribing what you put on a piece of paper into the computer.
Right. So what I'm inclined to do for this is to say something like all first choice write-in votes will be tabulated at the polls as required by state law.
Now, can that be done on an ongoing basis as the day goes on?
Like during the day?
I don't think
Right.
so.
No, no, only after the polls close.
It's not so bad though. I mean, I've done this, 4 times now, and it's not,
Yeah.
it takes 10 minutes,
The thing that takes the most is going through all the ridiculous, having to write down everybody who writes in themselves, and Mickey Mouse and Donald Duck and Donald Trump. And
It doesn't take that long though. I mean, it's like 15 minutes, half hour if there's a lot.
sometimes it's worse than others.
Yeah, I mean, it would be a long time if there was like a substantial write-in candidate. Probably.
Well, actually that makes it almost easier, because if there's somebody that you're looking for, you basically can sit there and stack them up. You pile them up. You don't have to do ballot by ballot. I mean, say when John Sybeck won, I think, we took the write-ins and we say, all right, all the write-ins for John Sybeck go in this pile. And then you just count them. So it's actually easier when you know that there's a serious write-in campaign, because then you can batch them all together. It's the whole scattered things of dealing with every little ridiculous write-in that takes the time. So, and obviously if there was a serious write-in campaign, then that would be a totally different story. We would deal with it just like we always deal with write-ins. I mean, it really doesn't change how we're dealing with write-ins. It's more like how are we putting them into the software, kind of.
Because presumably when you put that in the software, you'd have to say this person voted for Dan Gilbert, and then their second choice was so-and-so, and their third choice was so-and-so, and their fourth.
Correct.
You're going to have to do that for each write-in.
Yep, that's the adjudication process for write-ins. And that's why I'm not worried about this on the first run, right? But once we get familiar with the software, and we do it the first time, and we say, oh gosh, interesting. We could save a lot of work, of manual work, if we had the scans and could use the adjudication workflow in the software using the scans. Mm-hmm. At that point, I would be willing to go to the state and try to get the whole process for us to be able to use the scans for that purpose. Because the software supports it, the hardware supports it, but state law is a problem, right? So that's a battle to fight if it's worth fighting. But at the moment, we don't really know if it's worth fighting, and we have the means to do it without that, you know. And I'm not worried that it's going to be horrible. It might be a drag, especially if there's a write-in campaign, like a declared write-in candidate, and we have a lot that we need to go through and reconcile. It might be a drag, but I'm not worried that it's going to be like an, oh my God, we are in a situation that we cannot handle. And so that's why it's not keeping me up at night.
Yeah, I mean, the more I think about it, the thing I have at the polls is going to be more complicated, because say they write in John Sybeck #1 as a write-in, and then they put, you know, the other candidates as 2 and 3. I think that should be ignored at the poll. Well, actually, those numbers are already going to be in the computer. They're already going to be in the tabulator.
Yes, but here's the problem, right? The tabulator does not, we don't have ballot IDs, and they're secret ballots, right? So we don't have a way of matching them back up, right? Aside from doing that manually.
Oh yeah.
So here's a second option. I'm just throwing it out there because I think this is actually a really good discussion. Instead of doing this kind of tabulation that we have been doing, where we just say, okay, one vote for this person, another vote for this person, another vote for this person, we could use completely different forms at the polls. And what those forms do is they are cast vote records of all the ballots that have write-ins on them. So it would look completely differently, but you would go down the list and you would reconcile the ballots right then and there. And you would say, okay, ballot, first entry on the list. First choice is this, second choice is this, third choice is this, et cetera. And then you would satisfy state law by having dealt with all the write-ins at the polls. And then you would all
okay,
that
now I'm confused though, because if there's a race and that somebody wrote somebody in, and I mean, does it count anything on that ballot, or does it not? I mean, because usually, like if you have a ballot and people do all the rest, everything else right on the ballot, but they've got a write-in, I mean, the rest of the ballot is all counted. It's all in there. It's just that one race.
It's just race by race. I think all the data is stored race by race.
But even ranking by ranking, right? So if there's a write-in for Ronald Reagan as the first choice, then the Tom Peake second choice will count still. Is that what you're asking, Barb?
So is it just going to be the ranking that the person put the write-in that we need to tally at the polls? Everything else will be already counted. It's whatever this person ranked. They did all the rest of them for people on the ballot, and they wrote one person in for a ranking 2 on, you know, so it's going to count everything else. And the only thing we have to hand count down is that vote and where they ranked it. Is that right?
Yep.
Okay.
It seems like if you
Per
can't,
ballot per race, you know.
Well, I mean, like in a race though, I mean, you're going to have more, it's not just going to be one thing. So there's 2 people running, and somebody writes somebody in, and they put the write-in as number 1, and then they put, you know, Nicole next and Karen next.
Yep.
Will Karen and Nicole's votes be counted, or will they?
Will
those rankings be counted or not?
They will be counted, but we get to decide where they're counted, because
I mean, I'd rather have the machine count them and only have to deal with the race that the write-in is, you know, the ranking where the write-in was. You know,
the problem is,
because otherwise then you're hand counting a ballot and you're doing write-ins. I mean, I guess I don't know how the machine is going to handle that.
Well, again, so I can tell you exactly, the machine will handle a write-in as knowing it's a write-in and nothing else, right?
But if it's only for one ranking and the others were for people on the ballot, then it's only a ranking for, or a write-in for one ranking on one race.
Correct. Yep. So it will store essentially here. You guys can see my screen, right?
Mm-hmm.
So essentially, a normal. Imagine that this is the cast. You feed in a ballot, and this is just for one race, one ballot. There's no write-ins, right? So it's going to say like. It's going to say like this is the equivalent. It's going to say like 1 equals candidate A, 2 equals candidate bandidate. That's not a thing. Candidate B, 3 equals candidate C, and let's say W equals write-in, right? So it's going to store a list of cast vote records. And so the first ballot that gets fed through might look like 2. And what that means is the person voted first choice candidate 2 or candidate B, right? The next one that gets fed in looks like 1, 3. Okay. So what that means is this ballot,
one.
First choice A,
Yep.
Second choice C, right? So, and then the next one, they vote 1 W, right? So they voted for candidate A first, and then their second choice was a write-in. So that's all the information that the computer gets. It doesn't know what that write-in is, okay? Now, the problem is that write-in was for Mickey Mouse, right? The next ballot that gets fed in is 1 W, right? But it's not for Mickey Mouse. W is actually a write-in for candidate A, right? So the machine only gives us the data that there were 2 ballots that were for candidate A first and then a write-in for second place. We can't know more information about that without either hand counting and reconciling that and feeding that into the software, or the machine taking a scan of that ballot, associating it in its data with this ballot, and then later going to the software and saying, okay, you have to choose in the software who is this write-in for, right?
But isn't it? It's really, so the machine is gonna count the 2 1 1 1. It's gonna count that, and then it's gonna kick out into a separate compartment the 2 that have the W's.
Correct.
And we'll look in there and we'll see, okay, W, first one was Mickey Mouse, that's a blank. The next one, oh, that was really a vote for candidate B. So then I would go into the software and I would add a second ranking on one ballot to candidate B.
Yep.
It wouldn't matter whose ballot it was. It was just, you just know there's one more second ranking vote for candidate B.
Exactly.
Right.
Yep.
So
I'm sure the software has a pool of write-ins, and you go and you say, I have to adjudicate one of these write-in ballots that had a first choice here, and you put it in, and it goes from there. It updates,
Okay. As long as it's only the W's that are going to have, they're going to go into a separate area, and those will have to be, dealt with.
My hope here is that the software is smart enough that it only requires that we do this kind of data entry on non-first choice rankings when mathematically necessary. I don't think it's going to say, oh, we can't do this, until you enter all of these. I'm in my discussions with Jeff so far, I'm 95% sure that it's not going to force us to do reconciliation when it doesn't matter,
Okay.
Like if somebody gets 65% of the first choice votes.
It's not going to make us go through and
Okay. And also, I suspect that the software just treats all the write-ins as just a W, instead, just another digit. So if it's mathematically impossible for all the write-ins, regardless of who they are, to affect the outcome. Is that what you're saying, Dan? Is that what you're saying you suspect?
That's what I suspect, yes.
Yeah, same.
And if the software, again, like, I'm sort of counting on this to be the case, because if I was writing software, there's no way it wouldn't do this. But if it has this scenario where it says this is really close, it's going to pop up a thing that says write-ins must be adjudicated because they could swing the race,
This feels like a thing that you would want to automate because a person could miss it, but a computer, can be programmed to not miss it.
And it's not fuzzy, right? It's like either this could or it couldn't, and the computer, and it's not even hard to figure that out mathematically. So
No, it's not hard, but you might not get there as a human, but that's what computers are good at. They're good at picking up things that humans might miss.
Exactly. So I think that's pretty much how this is going to go down. What we as a committee and an ordinance need to decide is what is done on election night at the polls in order to satisfy state law and facilitate this process. Like, what is the easiest, best way of doing that? And so what we were kind of, what I was sort of musing about is currently what we do is we'd say, Mickey Mouse gets a vote. Okay, Mickey Mouse gets another vote. Oh, Donald Duck. It's going to be spelled Donad. Donald Duck gets a vote. Okay, Mickey Mouse gets another vote. Donald Duck gets another vote. Mickey Mouse gets, whatever. And then we're done. And this is just first choices. We're only looking at first choices, and then we have a list of who these first choice write-ins are for. State law is satisfied.
Of course, as you remember, Dan, we don't even count those votes. They are blanks.
I know, but let's say that this is,
Yeah, just as an example.
let's say that animated characters suddenly come to life and start running for office, and these are legit candidates, right? I wrote Don Lad. I'm going to leave it that way.
Can't win.
So if that's the question, and we're not exactly sure we suspect and assume that only the first round rankings will have to be counted by state law. That doesn't necessarily mean it's true. We could just change clause B to say all write-in votes that are required to be counted by state law shall be done.
Well, but state law doesn't know what ranked choice voting is, so keep that in mind.
Yeah, but that might change, and if we build our clause with the flexibility to just move with the state, we won't have to ever revisit it either.
That's true. What I'm wondering is it going to be more useful for us to, instead of doing this process on election night, to go through that stack of write-ins and have a very different form that facilitates doing this quickly, that allows us to essentially enter those cast vote records exactly as the ballot is. So instead of doing this process, we say, okay, first ballot is, we have 2, 3, W, and what we're actually doing right there in the thing is there's a box, and we're putting in, this is Donald Duck. And then the next ballot is 1, Donald Duck. And then, oh, look at that. We have another one that's 1 Donald Duck. Maybe either we have a tick mark next to them and we can say, okay, there's 2 of these, or we just list them out one by one and say, okay, we have another 1 Donald Duck.
My preference, I think, if, like, in theory, like, disregarding all workflow stuff, is that if we can't get the ballot images and then handle this through their workflow, which, I don't know, maybe the state would give us some leeway on that. You say the state law doesn't know what ranked choice voting is, but remember, we are enabled to do that through state law.
Right.
This is an act of the Massachusetts state legislature that permits us to do this.
Right.
So in a sense, in my preference would really be that basically any vote that has, or any ballot cast that has a write-in in it, is spit out and then, or at least is not counted for the race that it has a write-in on initially, and that then someone is manually entering in their rankings and just writing in what that write-in candidate is for on the spot, so that at that point we're not making any sort of call about so that, I mean, basically, so at that point we are staying as true to state law as possible. Because we are counting every vote.
Yeah.
Well, but so you're meaning hand counting ballots that have write-ins on them? I don't,
For the race that has the write-in.
I mean, I don't think that the machines can, I mean, I think they're going to count the way they're programmed. If somebody marks an oval next to a candidate in a ranking, I think the machine's going to count it.
Yeah.
It's not going to kick it out.
Let me interject to say that I am, again, not having used the software, but having read the stuff and looked at it, 96% sure that the software accounts for you reconciling, someone feeds the ballot in, it diverts it because it detects a write-in, but it knows that this is a 2W3, right? And then later in the software, you go in and you say, okay, I'm in the reconciliation process and I'm putting in 2 Donald Duck 3. The software then knows, hey, look at this. This one has been reconciled by this entry. It's not going to add another secret ballot in there or something, because we don't want to, it's not going to count as, we don't need to do this manually. It's going to already know, I have one of these and you just reconciled it as this.
Right.
So
the only ones you have to deal with are the names that are written in, because the machine can't read it. Right. Everything else is counted.
Right. And it's going to already know, okay, this ballot, it's not going to just kick it out and say, I can't do anything with this. It's going to say, this was a vote for this person, and then a write-in, and then number 3. And then when you, if needed, have to go in and reconcile your write-ins, you're going to reconcile this one, and it's going to say, aha, that's one of these 2W3 ballots, and now I know what the W is.
So
no, and except in that instance, it would, if that person did put Donald Duck, then it would be a blank.
Yeah.
It wouldn't be counted at all. The only ones that would be kicked out totally would be blank voted ballots or overvotes.
Correct. Yeah.
And these just go in a separate compartment. They've gone through the machine. They're in the ballot box. They're just separated from the rest of the ballots that are all properly marked without write-ins.
Yep. Tom, did you have a?
I guess this process all sounds fine to me, but I guess what I'm really asking is, just for the point of view of how people interact with democracy, is can we figure out a way to determine those races where write-ins are not going to make a difference, and potentially, if this process does end up taking a while, get some preliminary results out before we've tied up every Mickey Mouse and Donald Duck?
Well, that's the tape at the end of the night that gets posted on the wall.
Yeah, that will just give you who did the first. That tape on the wall is just going to tell you if somebody got 50% on the first ranking.
But I don't think that tape is going to be very relevant, because that tape is going to show Precinct 1's tape. And so since we're ranking, Precinct 1 and Precinct 5 might rank their candidates very differently. So, and the population differences make it it's useless information, basically, I think, anyway.
Well,
not completely, but
because
close to it.
No, not necessarily. Somebody could definitely win right away.
Right.
Sure.
You would just add your numbers together, and just like we do now, and you'd know you win.
Sure.
Right. And it's that's not going to take any longer than it currently does. So there will be immediate feedback.
I mean, truthfully, the write-ins, unless there's a declared write-ins, that the write-ins aren't going to make, it would be unofficial, the unofficial results. And lots of times I don't deal with the write-ins until the next day. They're all counted, but I don't deal with them that night.
Actually, let me back up a second. So will the tape say, we had 500 2W3s or 500 213s? And
No.
It won't, okay.
Just have
It's only going to show, again, 90% sure here because we haven't done it, but I think it only shows the first choice.
Okay.
I don't think it does a full cast vote record.
It'll probably have a, like right now, there's a column for write-ins or
Right.
all others or something like that. And there's just a number. But at the end of the night, that number hardly ever matches because half of them, are for, fictional characters, or they just marked, they're half of them are blank anyway. So you can never go by that number on the tape anyway. You have to look at your write-ins and see what you've got.
But the tapes are there, so if somebody won on won a majority in the first round, then you get that at least, and if not, you might need to wait a little while.
Yeah.
Okay, well then I would suggest that we just don't put anything in here now until we actually get a chance to see the software and experience what that's going to be like.
I mean, you could leave
for-
Dan's first sentence in there just to have something in there for write-ins right now, in case, just to kind of cover quote write-ins.
My one thing here is just knowing the state, and the state part better than I do, but I know them a little bit. I feel that if we are doing this, we probably need to consider the possibility that they're going to want us to count not just the first choice, but the second choice and the third choice write-ins at the polls, where they're going to just read that very literally and say, that's a vote. And
well, the state doesn't look at our ordinance. The state's not going to be approving our ordinance.
It's only if somebody challenges it in court.
right. But if there was a case where it did get contentious and it turned out that we didn't count somebody's second choice vote at the poll, then it would be a whole stupid thing.
Could be, I suppose.
I mean, I think maybe we should just go to what I have in the state regs right now for write-ins and just see if it would just, what it kind of says, like.
I am curious.
I mean, it tells us how to tally write-ins, like what kind of things count and, markings and, voters' intent and that kind of stuff. But I mean, there might be some like really short little statement about write-ins. I mean, we have to deal with all the ballots at the polls. Everything has to be counted at the polls. And that includes write-ins. You can't bring them back and do them in the office.
So I'm thinking that counting only the first choice write-ins at the polls, while it might satisfy state law, is a little bit of a waste because that's not really going to help a whole lot.
Well, it never does, but we still have to do it.
But we still have to do it. However, I think we can use that time as an opportunity to do all the reconciliation. And then if and when that does need to be entered into the software, it's all right there in one piece of paper. We don't have to flip through ballots.
Right. I mean, if you're dealing with
have our
like,
past vote records right there.
I mean, if you're dealing with like 25 ballots and they've got a smattering of write-ins, and as long as there's like a spreadsheet that makes sense and I can train my workers to use it, we might as well just do it. Just do it.
I'm confident that I could, without having thought about it before, that I could design a form that would easily allow hand entry of CVRs involving write-in names too.
I mean, I think it would be easier for the workers to just deal with every ballot that has a write-in, unless it's a stupid one, a fictional person, or to any of the real person write-ins, no matter what rankings they are, just have a form made up that they could just deal. And then if we needed to input them,
we go to the form.
Matters, we would have it. We shouldn't be pulling ballots out to count them anyway.
Exactly.
To look
That
at them
way-
later.
Yeah, that way every ballot is only handled once, and let's not forget that. Well, not forget, but we never know what the state might think. I mean, a second choice ballot might become. I mean, a second choice vote might become a first choice vote when you eliminate that first candidate.
I don't really think it's the state. I think it's like, what if there's a recount? Then that instance, there could be an instance where, and the ballots are supposed to be sealed up at the end of the night. You're not supposed to look at them. Town election, we only have to keep them for 30 days, but within that 30 days, there could be a recount. The write-ins should be all, I think as long as we can design a form that makes it easy for the workers at the polls, I think they all should be, all the rankings, the write-ins should be tallied at the polls.
What about that? All ballots with write-in votes will be counted and recorded as cast vote records at the polls.
And then we're going to know, you'll know if there's somebody that you need to put in the software, even if it's somebody that maybe gets 20 votes. If it's easy to put them in just to have their name in there, then it won't hurt anything.
Yep.
It won't make any difference, but it won't hurt anything, would it?
No, and in fact, I think that one thing that I've said before is that ranked choice voting could be cool in that even if it doesn't actually determine, even if somebody wins on the first round, if I was running in a 3 or 4 person race, even if I won or definitely lost on the first round, I would still be a little bit interested in knowing who put me second, whose voters put me second. Because if I could say so if there was a write-in candidate who ran against me, I would be kind of interested in knowing, did those people's voters put me second, or if I had another opponent, did they put that person second? Because it's just interesting information to have for an elected official to kind of know.
It's interesting information for everyone. This is valuable data that tells us what the voters really think.
I have an idea. Now my next question is totally, I'm thinking, I had thought about this earlier. Should we set a threshold? No, because if you have somebody, we're not doing it. Mayor, I suppose you could get somebody. At what point, what threshold will the clerk need to put that person into the software? Do we need to determine a number? Any person that has more than 10 votes should be entered into the software, or, something like, is there something like that?
What if we do it like this? Say, if no candidate has a majority of first choice votes. So that means, again, this is a state law thing, isn't it? Shit.
No, okay. I think what you had before was good, but as far as is it going to be kind of be left up to the discretion of the clerk to say, this person's got 5 votes in this precinct. Should I throw them in there because they might have 20 in the next precinct and 15,
It's not going to be the discretion of the clerk. It's going to be the discretion of the software, because the software is going to pop up and say, this is mathematically required to be reconciled.
No, say you have 100 write-ins and you have one person that got 10 in the first ranking and the rest were all just scattered. Do I say, okay, I'm going to enter that person's name in, because maybe they've got some votes other places, and should it just be up to the discretion of, should there be something in here that we say any candidate that receives at least 10 write-in votes shall be entered into shall be tallied, separately or something like that, or have some threshold number?
I don't think we need it, because I think the software is going to know.
But they're not going to know. How are they going to know? They're just going to know there's 100 write-ins. They don't know who the write-ins are for. And
exactly, but it can still do the math to determine if any of those write-ins are going to be
But what if you're somebody who wants to know, oh, I mean, you know, like Alex Morse, I mean, I didn't really have to tally him, but I felt it was a good idea to keep track of it in case somebody asked. I mean, is it something that will just be up to the discretion like it is kind of now? Or should there be something specific set out in here?
I don't know.
I think the ideal would be to, I mean, like, in theory, the ideal would be to have a form that makes it easy and reconcile every write-in.
That's what I was going to say. I mean, if you're not going to like my opinion on it, but I think we should know how many people voted for Donald Duck every election.
Well, Donald Duck is a blank. It's always a blank. But I'm not going to put
state law, right?
I'm not going to input every single write-in into the software. I mean, it's just ridiculous. You know, like every single name. We don't do that now. I mean, those are just, you just don't do that. It's ridiculous. So, I mean, that's why I say, if you see somebody who's got a certain number, but you can't just, because almost every write-in gets one vote. And you might have, you know, 100 write-ins of one vote across the 5 precincts, and you just, that's just ridiculous.
No, I understand that it's definitely an onerous task, but to see that 100 voters out of like 3,000 were disenfranchised enough to not, or disenchanted enough with the candidates to vote for themselves or Donald Duck is valuable information.
Well, I think you would still have the written record like we always do, but as far as inputting it all into the software when it doesn't make any difference.
Yeah. No, I understand.
You can always call my office and say, did I get any, I mean, like anybody who wants a copy of whoever got write-ins. I mean, it's not like because it's being recorded at the polls, we know who they got, you know, we know the names, but I mean, as far as inputting it into the software, every single name, I mean, that would be like Tom's thing where it wouldn't matter. So you have it written down, but you're not going to input it into the software. I mean, it's not like you don't have it, but it doesn't need to, I mean, that's silly.
So we're not going to be able to resolve this particular question, but it's a very concrete question that we will know the answer to. And that question is, how clever is the software at reducing the degree that we need to manually reconcile write-ins? And my hope is pretty clever. In the worst case, the software is not clever at all and says, you got to manually reconcile all the write-ins before I do anything. I think that's very, very unlikely, but we don't know because we don't have the software right in front of us.
The sense I got from our discussion with Jeff is that is not the case.
I'm 90%, 99% sure that is not the case, in that it has some degree of, but we don't know what degree that is. So the only way we're going to know that is to find out. In the meantime, I think that what I'm getting from this discussion is that we feel reasonably comfortable, I think, as a committee, saying we have to count write-ins at the polls, but we're going to do it in a slightly different way than we've done in the past, where instead of tallying, we're going to record cast vote records onto a form, and that form is going to be available at the end of the night, and to anyone else who needs or wants it. But it is not necessarily all going to be input into the computer unless the software demands it. And the demands of that software are indeterminate until we get our hands on it. But it seems like that's where the committee is kind of gravitating towards, like, that is reasonable, that is compliant with state law. It is even, in fact, helpful because it means we won't ever have to go back to these ballots once they're put in the boxes. And we'll have these, you know, it might be a little bit more work and a little bit different workflow at the polls to do these cast vote records, but it's not going to be crazy. It's not going to be vastly different than what we do now. And to me, that sounds reasonable. And
the language is clear and concise.
Seems fine to me.
Seems like it's got a lot of advantages.
Yeah. So, I mean, I'm happy with that.
Sounds good to me.
I mean, it's almost not even necessary. I mean, we could just black because state law has already says it. But you know,
I don't think it hurts anything.
it doesn't hurt anything. And
What's the definition of cast vote record? Is that something that can be done at the poll, or does that require software entry?
no. All a cast vote record is a where did I go here? Here. All a cast vote record is it's essentially a transcription of a ballot. So instead of it being the image of a ballot, it says, 3W2.
Oh, that's cool. I just wanted to make sure it was something.
W equals Donald Duck. That's a cast vote record.
Okay.
So essentially, you're taking a particular race on a particular ballot and turning it into that. And then your form is a list of that, Whereas currently, you'd write down the name and then you'd put an X next to it. But in this case, each ballot would get one cast vote record.
Yeah, we'll have to work on that a little bit because
no, it has to be a nice form. It has to be easy.
Yeah, and it has to be easy to count the votes.
Exactly.
Easy to count those.
Yeah, but I'm confident in our ability to do that, and I don't think it needs.
Okay.
I don't think more detail in the ordinance needs to.
No. That'll be something we'll work on later.
Yeah. Are we without necessarily needing to take a vote? Are we pretty good at this on this? Are we feeling like our level of exposure to risk and delays is? We've talked about that some. If it turns out that there's onerous things, I'm not worried about any catastrophes from this. But if there's things that turn out to be onerous, I think that we could return to it and potentially make them less onerous.
No, I think this is good. I think that this is actually the most thorough you can get.
Yeah.
I'm comfortable with it for now, but I'm not going to want to schedule a public hearing of the city council until we've actually played this out enough that I can feel comfortable telling my colleagues that we've really thought this through and it's going to work.
Okay.
Fair.
And we're going to have this software very soon. there's already, I have a little updates on that, but we have a purchase order in already and Jeff is already working on preparing it. So, Owen.
Yeah, so yes, I agree with Tom, but also just so I understand, we're going with B in section X4 temporarily, and that's our placeholder until we were able to kind of test this out by doing some simulations.
It's not even a placeholder. It might be everything that we need. Mm-hmm. I think that it's only if the software is different than what we kind of think that we might need to revisit this. But if the software behaves the way that I think we all understand that it probably will, then I don't think this is a placeholder. I think it's simply what B says.
Right. Yeah. So meaning this is our choice. This is our final choice of language pending some different scenario that would play out when we look at the software.
Yeah,
I think that's fair to say about everything that we've written, right? We want to get a look at it.
That's
true, if something crashes and burns, we'll take another look at it.
Right. And potentially this one a little bit more than the others, just because it's a little bit more of an unknown. Yeah. Cool. Okay. All right. I'm going to say that we should move on a little bit. So we've addressed this. I will take this moment to update officially from Jeff, which is Jeff did look at our ordinance it was the draft prior to that, basically, and the alphabetization. And the totality of comments that I have gotten from him is, yes, it looks good.
All right. Thanks, man.
So he acknowledges, yes, once the PO, you'll send it over and you'll get an invoice. Barbara's going to work all that out. At that point, Barbara's going to discuss with Jeff directly upgrading our ImageCast firmware, getting the laptop, and then dealing with training. So we get 2 hours of training. It's not I think it's going to be available to anyone, certainly on this committee who wants to do it, but I imagine that probably the only people who actually do it are me and Barbara, and then perhaps Tom. I don't know anyone else who's interested in doing it.
Yeah. Do you think he's going to do a thing like he was doing in Amherst where he's going to make up some ballots and have us all mark them up and then run them through the software?
I would imagine. Yeah, I would think doing it is the best way to learn it.
I think that's what I'd kind of like, is to actually have us, do some ballots, because I think that's what he did in Amherst.
I mean, even if he doesn't do, if that's not part of the whatever 2 hours of training, that's something that I would want to do with you on our own anyway. Like,
Yeah.
I feel like that would be the best way to learn this whole thing, is to just by doing it. So,
Yeah.
And I'm sure he could facilitate that in terms of like blank ballots or whatever. But there's no question that is something I would want to do regardless of whether it's part of their training or not. So he also says, I've submitted the necessary documents to Michelle, which according to Barbara is the person at the state to schedule to approve the software. So I guess that's a certification thing. I will let you know how that process goes once I hear back from her. Since we have already completed the process for Cambridge, I don't think it will be difficult to get approval for Easthampton. So that's an update. I don't have more information from him than that. I do want to share, and feel free to just interrupt me here if you guys have any comments, or you can raise your hand and I'll try and keep an eye on it. But I do want to, as part of our ordinance review, I did, from either our last meeting or the one before that, have a, trying to grab this little thing, have some back and forth with Jeff with a bunch of questions. So I just kind of want to go over the ones that are pertinent here. So what I said was, there's some confusion about the ICPs being able to scan and save digital files. And the answer there was, there is an option to save digital files, but it's not allowed by state law. Or sorry, we are not allowed by the state to turn it on. That's what he said. If you wanted to utilize this function, we'd have to somehow get approval from the state. So that's interesting to note that hardware and software wise, that's a possibility, but it's a bureaucratic thing that we may want to look into more.
Do you have any lead on why the state does that like that?
No.
Maybe there's a perfectly good reason that we don't know.
Yeah, and that's not just for ranked choice voting. I mean, because the other machine, the ES&S machine, that's something they kind of say at the conferences that they can do that, but the state hasn't let them either. So it's not just our machine or ranked choice voting. It's
right.
I don't know why. Who knows?
Yep. So I had asked, what is the general workflow of the write-in reconciliation process? And I said, is there a nice software RTR workflow for tabulating, assigning, entering write-in votes? And the answer that I got was, by law, I believe the write-in RICO has to be done at the precinct. There is a module in the software to RICO so that write-in votes can be part of the RCV process. This would be covered in training. So it's not a super in-depth, detailed answer, but take that for what you will. He seems like it's, this is a thing and it's covered by the thing. So I had a question before about that uses precinct setting. So I was looking over this and I saw a thing that said, if this option is checked, the system will perform all calculations per precinct and allow for reporting to report each precinct separately. By leaving it unchecked, all results will not be separated by precinct. So I wanted to ask him, does this actually have to do with the algorithm and how things are counted, or is it just reporting? Is this kind of doing a just for fun calculation by separating it all out into precincts and doing an IRV for just that precinct? And I still haven't gotten a great answer to that. He said, I have to find out more about this function before I can answer this question. I believe it is meant for precinct-specific contexts, such as district counselor. Give me some time and I'll get you a definitive answer. So I'm still following up about that because I want to make sure that, we're getting a legitimate mathematical result for something like mayor that's citywide, even with that checked, you know. So I wrote
Actually, sorry, Dan, to interrupt, but that's actually an interesting question, because I suspect it's to sort out for precinct races too, but that's a global option to tick off, isn't it? It's not a race by race option, is it?
It is global, but again, the way this is designed is you can have multiple profiles, so you can have different profiles to use for different races.
Okay.
So it might be something that you enable on precinct-wide ones and not on other ones.
Okay, yeah, that was my concern.
We had previous conversation about wanting to have results from precincts. That's interesting information, and I'm committed to making sure that we can do that, you know. So that's going to be a little bit of we're going to deal with that in training and figure out exactly what that's about. I wrote about timing for funds, and he says we need to build a laptop and upgrade your firmware on the vote tabulators. This can all be done pretty quickly. And I asked about what is the training cover. The 2-hour training is only for the RCV tally software. The training can be done in person or virtually, so I'm presuming COVID, it can probably be done virtually if we decide. That's it I have from him. I sent him some document stuff, and the overall answer was yes, it looks good. So the only big follow-up I have there has to do with the uses precincts thing, and I'll hound him for more follow-up on that, just so we know. But even if he doesn't answer us in advance, it's something that we'll talk about in training. So, okay, we talked about the alphabetizing. Okay, any more ordinance stuff? I don't have any other ordinance specific conversation. I basically have that more or less for now. The config setting summary page, which is the plain English thing, is not something that I've started, but it's something that I will hopefully have a draft of to present to everybody next meeting. But I kind of wanted to not put the cart before the horse there.
So what do you think, I mean, you, Tom and Owen, what are you thinking on timing wise getting this to the council? I mean,
I'd definitely like to get it before July.
Oh, I'd even like to get it sooner. Well,
I agree. I'd like to get it ASAP, but definitely before July, because that's when people start pulling papers.
Well, I know, but I mean, as far as the ordinance, that doesn't matter. I mean, it could go in May, you know, I mean.
Yeah, totally. I mean, just to be clear, the reason why I think that that's like our absolute dead has to get done dead date or like due date is like, I don't want this not settled at the point that the race starts in earnest. I don't want there being the idea that any of the decisions that we made are made with really any knowledge of who's running even. And so it's just a political thing. I'd like to get it done. Like basically what I'd like to do personally is do the training, or I don't have to be involved in the training, but I'm willing to be involved in the training, but have some of us do the training, look this over, say, yep, everything here makes sense and would totally work with how we understand this. We filled out some sample ballots and ran it through and everything went the way that we wanted. We feel really good about this. The folks on the council who might be a little bit like, you know, I mean, I just, without naming names, like, you know, there's certain counselors that are going to be like, and did you make sure that you did this and that and whatever, which is good that they should do that. And I'd like to be able to really confidently say in that public hearing, like, yes, we did the training, we tested it out, everything works, this is going to work. And at that point, we should just schedule a public hearing whenever that happens. You know, if that can be next month, then awesome. If it's May, then great. But it definitely needs to be before July.
Yep. Well, we're thinking too, meetings go once a month, June, July, and August.
I sort of suspect that might not be the case this year. I will see. Like, just given how freaking long these meetings are. I believe that last summer, didn't we do twice a,
Yes, and that did not make me happy.
well, it didn't make me happy, but if we had tried to do all of that business, I mean, one of those meetings went until like 1 a.m. So
Yeah, that was because of Bill and the budget. That's why.
yeah. But like, I guess the point is like these meetings go so long with the roll call votes and COVID and everything that like, unless we can figure out a way to I digress. My point is like, I don't.
Yeah, I guess I think this should go earlier rather than later. I mean, as soon as we can make sure that, I mean, there's a lot of stuff in here I don't understand. So, as soon as it feels like it's right, I think it should get to the council as soon as possible. But yeah. I mean, I would like to see the software, in person first, but I mean, that could probably be within the next month or so.
Perfect.
I mean, the good news is I feel good about this draft. Like, I feel like barring unforeseen things in the software, this is ready to go, except the only thing is an appendix with the settings in plain English stuff but
that doesn't really have to be part of the ordinance, does it?
It doesn't have to be. I'd like it to be there as a reference, but it doesn't need to be part of the ordinance.
I mean, because who's really going to understand? I mean, I would say it would probably just is not necessary for something like that to be in the ordinance.
It's not. No.
Yeah.
It would just be supporting material for anyone who has questions about it. But I mean, in that sense, I feel like we're in really good shape because I don't have more to nitpick on this at this point.
So next steps, get the stuff, check the stuff.
Yeah.
Onward.
Basically what Sarah just said.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I mean, just check it with the software. Just do another kind of run through like we've done previously, and I think what's it? January? When are we getting the software?
Well, I mean,
get it within weeks, I think.
The purchase order is ready. I mean, I think that the state has to okay it, and then.
Yeah, I mean, we can get this by March or April, I think. Right, Tom?
I think so. I mean, I think it's pretty close to done. I think as soon as we test it out, feel good about it, I'm good to schedule a public hearing for the next city council meeting, and I expect I think this is well thought through. I just want to make sure that we can very confidently say, like, yes, we have actually used the software with the machines on these parameters and everything worked and we feel really good about it, and the things that could potentially go wrong messed around with and that was fine too.
Yep, that makes
because
sense.
those are the sorts of questions that they're going to ask in the council.
Yeah.
Yeah, that'll be great. All right, so let's move on to briefly funding discussion. We've kind of covered a bunch of this, which is that the funding got approved. We have a purchase order. We're going to be paying LHS the $8,000 ASAP, and we're going to get stuff. So fortunately, that's all done, or not done, but at least in progress. Approved. Approval's done. So I wanted to talk a little bit about the education funding. Was that what you were going to bring up, Barbara?
Yeah, because I'm going to be working on this is going to be, I guess, part of my budget. And I need to, the 4,000 that you've laid out for whatever, I need to know what
that is.
What it is, so I can explain it when the mayor asks me about it.
So the 4,000 was my slightly rounded up estimate of what it would cost to print and mail a simple mailer to every address in Easthampton. This would be a two-sided color mailer. They can be pretty big. You've seen all the candidate ones.
It only has to go to voters.
Only has to go to voters, right? But here's the thing. Sending it to a list of voters is going to be a lot more expensive than sending it to every mailing address. quite a bit more expensive, because the way the every mailing address works, it's like the mailer that recently came from the mayor that had COVID information. That goes through a process of the Postal Service called EDDM, which stands for Every Door Direct Mailing. And it's insanely less expensive than first-class mail. First-class mail is what you have to use if you have a mailing list and you're addressing each thing individually. That's like how the census goes out. It gets addressed to a specific person. If it's going to postal customer and it goes to every address on that route, it costs a fraction of what it costs to send it to an address. So the $4,000 estimate is based on that EDDM, which in this case I feel like is a good benefit, because it means we spend a lot less money, and it's going to go to people who aren't registered, and maybe it's going to get them to register. You know, I don't think it's going to get people to deregister.
You know, it might be worth asking Nicole or whoever put that flyer together how much that actually cost them.
Yeah, that would be great. The reality is, based on my previous work on a political campaign that may or may not have anything to do with this committee's existence, I have done this before. So I actually have the invoices from the Postal Service and the print shop that was used and all that. So my estimate is based on reality, but it would be interesting just because a couple of years have passed. And
there might be a municipal rate or something.
There are nonprofit rates that may not apply to this because they require a permit, and the permit costs quite a bit of money. So in some ways you're not saving anything by going that route. But my guess is that the mayor's office used a firm to do this for them. So it's possible that they spent more money than my estimate is, because my estimate was based on me doing it myself. I contacted the print shop, dealt with all the, I picked it up, and I dealt with the post office directly and delivered, the trays of these things to the post office. And so I'm confident that we could do all that for under $4,000.
Just quick question, Barb,
Yeah.
do you know, I'm sure the city has a permit with the post office, right? Do you happen to know that?
Not as far as I know, because pretty much all of us who do large mailings do it through a vendor.
Okay.
So we used to have a business reply mail thing but it got expensive, and so, but like the tax bills, water bills, census, we all use vendors.
Okay.
So this is the kind of thing that could be done through a vendor. I know that would cost more than us just doing it, and I know that having done it before, it's not terrible to do. Like, I did it and it's fine. So that's why I didn't necessarily feel like we need to ask for more money than necessary, especially when the budget being tight. I could do this with myself, or it could go twice as fast with the help of one other person. So
the 4,000 was just for one mailing?
Correct. One mailing, every household in the city, and printing. If we want to do other things that cost money, we'll have to ask for more money. And this does not cover design of said mailer. That's something that would be.
It doesn't include the design?
It does not, no.
Well, who would do that? How would we?
Well, I assume I would, or we would do it together as a committee and approve it or something. But this does not include paying someone to do writing or design work. That would be volunteer based. But it's something that I'm also willing to volunteer.
Right. No, me too. I just assumed that was part of the committee.
Yeah.
Okay.
Owen.
This is being mailed out sometime next fall. Is that?
This would be up to us. It's kind of.
I think it should be after the deadline for, because what if we don't even need ranked choice voting at this election? I mean, there is that possibility. There's
going to be at least one precinct city councilor race that has two candidates listed on the ballot. That would be very unlikely if everyone was running unopposed.
It hasn't been unlikely in the past, but that doesn't.
That everybody runs unopposed?
It has happened.
It's happened? Okay.
But I think times are a little different now. It probably will. But
yeah.
I would think it should go out in, say, October.
Yeah, you don't want it to be too far in advance that it's irrelevant, and you don't want it to be, or that it's forgotten about, and you don't want it to be too late because you don't want people to be like, no one told me that this was going to be happening. You know?
Yeah, and if it gets closer to it, it could also have voting information on it, like where to vote and hours and things like that,
Yep.
Yeah, I think that's great. I mean, I could think that there's like other things like I would love to see this might be like post ordinance what we talk about, but like I'd love to see if like the Council on Aging or the schools or anything wanted to do anything around this in terms of programming, and if things are going to have costs, we might need to figure out what that looks like. But I don't know exactly what that would be.
Owen?
Yeah, and there's, relatively, I think, free opportunities too for using Easthampton media or just recording some videos about this and putting them on, social media and out there too. So that costs nothing.
I don't know what the status of the city website is, but I know there was a plan to have an overhauled city website with a new vendor.
It's in the works, or it's starting to be in the works. So
it would be nice to coincide with the launch of a new city website to have ranked choice voting voter information on there as well. So, but I don't necessarily see a fixed cost associated with that kind of stuff, except in the time it takes to prepare that material. But we're here doing that anyway, so.
So I guess at this point, for my budgeting purposes, I'm going to put in the $800 for the licensing, because it will come up, if we're going to buy this software now, it's going to be a year. So I'll need the $800, and I'll put the $4,000 in for the mailing.
Yeah, but make sure that's indicated as a one-time. That's not going to be a recurring yearly budget expense.
Oh, right.
Just a one-time.
Right. So I have to have my budget in for February 1st.
Okay.
So it's very soon, and unless I'm told differently, that's what I'm going to put in for it.
There's one other thing in terms of budget that might be interesting to put in, which is to have, and this probably wouldn't be particularly expensive, but to have voter material printed and available at the polls for people.
If it could be something that's photocopied, we could just photocopy it.
Yeah. Do we have like a color photocopier? Or is it just
not enough to make like huge numbers, no.
So it might not hurt to have a few $100s in there for potentially printing that. So if you want, if you want in the budget, we could make this 4,500.
4,500.
And say that it could, and if you need to explain, say that could also cover the printing costs of in-person voter.
Okay. All right. I'll do 4,500 for that.
Yeah.
Who knows what it'll end up at, but.
Yeah, but that would be great if we decide to do that. I don't, off the top of my head, don't have anything else that would go into that category.
Okay.
And I think that's all we have, more or less, on funding. I'm gonna stop screen sharing. And is there any new business? I'm hearing a lot of crickets. So, in that case, I think we're in good shape. I'm curious to just poll other members of this committee. Who else, this is not a like you have to or you should, but who else would want to participate in the software training with Jeff? Chris? Owen?
Me, of course.
I think Barbara and me are kind of
I personally would love to have it be in person.
I know, that would be nice. So maybe, he might be open to that, and I think we could arrange to do it COVID safe.
If we're going to be running it through the machine.
Exactly.
I don't know. It depends on what kind of software training. I don't know. I think it depends on what the training is.
Yeah. He expressed he was he said it could be done remotely, but he also kind of expressed that it could be done in person. And so, but that would be my vote. And I think we could do it socially distanced and masked and have it be safe. So, okay. So it looks like it's probably going to be at least 5, potentially 5 to 10, depending if there's people not on this committee who would want to do it. Sarah,
I mean, he may be able to do some of it.
If you think that I need to, I'll certainly do it. But
I don't think you need to. I think.
Yeah, I was going to say I don't think I need to go through the full training, but
this is a case of
demonstration.
If you're like excited and interested and want to participate and have this knowledge, but I don't think it's something that everyone on this committee absolutely needs to do. It's only at this point, it's if you want to do it and you're.
Yeah, when you got kids right now, it's just hard to put more things on your plate because they're in your hair 24/7.
Honestly, I didn't expect that there was going to be as many people of this committee who would be interested in doing it, but I think it's a cool COVID activity to learn how this stuff works. So, I think that's great, and we'll be scheduling that very soon. I think as soon as we can, we'll be scheduling that. I just don't want to schedule it before we know that we have the software and the machines,
if it did end up being a in-person thing, which I don't know, I guess it depends on how Jeff would do it. I mean, he lives quite a long ways away, so I have a feeling it might be a daytime thing.
Yeah, probably.
I don't know. I think I'll leave that up to him as to what he even means by software training.
Yeah.
I mean, it might be something for now, and then he'll come out later and really give us the down and dirty of it.
Yeah, we could do an hour and then another hour. One of those could be in person and one could be virtual. Right. Okay, so and then we need to do a next meeting date. So we're looking at February 18th.
Yep.
How's that look for people?
Good for me.
Right. Hearing not a lot of opposition.
I can't at the work, but it's just me. If the rest of the committee can be there, I wouldn't.
Does the 11th or 25th work better for you?
The 25th would be better.
Okay. How's that for everyone else?
Works for me.
But
all right.
Okay.
6 or 6:30?
6 o'clock.
Okay.
So February 25th?
February 25th, Thursday, February 25th, 6 o'clock.
Okay.
We'll have our next meeting. And that's all I got.
Okay.
Do we have a motion to close? Adjourn. And second?
I'll second.
And all in favor?
Aye.
All right.
All right.
And any opposed or abstaining?
Nope.
Cool. We are adjourned.
Okay.
Hey, Dan, I just want to thank you. You've done so much work. Much appreciated.
Yeah, really.
yeah,
It's my pleasure. I mean, to be frank, the state initiative not passing hurt. Like, that sucked because I did a lot of work on that. And the thing that has made it hurt a lot less is the fact that I get to be involved in this, which is I'm involved in this in a way that I would not be involved in the implementation on a statewide level at all. I mean, we would get it passed and it would just be sort of in the Secretary of State's hands and Boston and all that. So, I mean, I consider myself lucky that I get, compared to a lot of the people who worked on this and sort of don't get any fruits of it, like me and Tom at least get to do this, which is.
But you're very good at keeping all the technical knowledge and specificities and interactions of those things in your head. So it's real good, real good.
Good.
All I can say is when it gets down to election day, I hope the machines do all the work for us. Because otherwise, I'm going to be in trouble.
You can't move, Dan. You have to live here forever.
Well, I'm going to, like I said from the beginning, I'm going to be here through this whole process. And that certainly includes election day. So And I don't know if you guys know, but I'm going to be an election warden for the first time next year.
Yes, he's going to be a boss. I told him he can only do that if he can still help. I almost
Yeah.
was hesitant to do it because I'm going to need him for the ranked choice
Yeah,
vote.
but that ensures that I'll be there for the whole, the whole day, and we'll be doing it all together. So
There was another woman that I really wanted to put as at least a clerk. She's moving to Montana.
oh no,
What do you do that for?
Her husband got a job, and I was like, "What? You and your daughter? I can't lose you two good election workers."
oh man, I do think I found a clerk.
Oh, good.
So
Yeah,
I'll be emailing both of you this week to sort that out. So she's a lawyer, and
She'll have to do all the paperwork, and
yeah, she'll love it.
great. Okay,
Cool.
All right. Bye,
Thanks,
guys.
everybody.
thank you.
Good night, everybody. Thank you.